How does the public behavior of those in political, cultural, and economic power shape the conduct of the broader public, especially children? I found myself reflecting on this question during a conversation with a colleague after a long day of teaching. We were discussing patterns of bullying, rumor spreading, and apparent indifference to consequences amongst students. According to CDC and Pew surveys, roughly 1/3 of American teenagers report being bullied in the past year, and many describe online harassment as a significant concern. This essay is not an argument for a direct causal relationship between national politics and classroom behavior. Peer dynamics, digital media, and adolescent development all play powerful roles. However, historical analysis reveals a recurring pattern. When those in authority publicly engage in bullying, retaliation, or the evasion of accountability, such conduct has influenced the behavior and values of the broader public, including children. Certain features of the present political environment invite historical comparison. Public accusation, the targeting of dissent, the evasion of accountability are visible in the actions of individuals who hold political, economic, and cultural power today. Comparable patterns appeared during the McCarthy era, in the Jim Crow South, and during the Nixon administration. In those earlier periods, such practices were formalized in law and policy and reflected in the personal conduct of political and cultural elites. They were publicly observable. Members of the broader public could see how powerful figures leaned into cruelty and the vilification of particular groups, and how, in many cases, those actions had few visible consequences. Historians, including myself, have examined those periods closely, identifying patterns in which the behavior of those in authority influenced social conduct more broadly. The question that interests me now is not whether the present moment is identical to those earlier periods. It is how the visible conduct of powerful individuals has shaped public behavior, including that of our children. Those patterns feel less abstract when viewed from a classroom. Social behavior emerges from many sources: family structure, peer groups, economic conditions, media environments, and developmental stages. But historical scholarship shows that when people in positions of power publicly modeled bullying, retaliation, or the evasion of accountability, and faced no perceptible consequences, similar behavior patterns extended beyond elite circles into broader public life. In some historical moments, such practices were not only tolerated, but recast as expressions of loyalty, strength, or even civic responsibility. Consider the Jim Crow South. Under Jim Crow, injustice was not merely tolerated, but enforced by law. Children did not simply observe violence carried out in public and without accountability. Many were forced into participation through lynching bees and other rituals of segregationist terror. White children learned that authority defined right and wrong, because courts, police, schools, and local governments consistently enforced racial hierarchy and shielded white violence from consequence. By contrast, Black children learned that justice was conditional and protection unreliable. A different version of this pattern appeared in the 1950s, during the McCarthy era. In the early 1950s, congressional hearings and loyalty investigations transformed suspicion into public performance. Careers were damaged or destroyed through accusation alone. Blacklists extended beyond government into universities, entertainment, and private industry. Accusation became a tool of political positioning. To denounce was to signal loyalty. Suspicion was rewarded with visibility. These practices were not confined to Washington. Citizens informed on colleagues and neighbors. Professional relationships fractured. Fear of association reshaped everyday behavior. The state's modeling of accusation and trial by innuendo diffused into civil society. By the 1970s, the pattern took another form during the Nixon administration. Opposition to the Vietnam War was framed not simply as disagreement, but as an existential threat to the nation. The rhetoric of the silent majority constructed a moral divide between those deemed legitimate and those it cast as disruptive. Federal agencies were used to monitor and target critics. The administration maintained an enemies list, and Nixon and his administration repeatedly lied and obstructed investigations in an effort to avoid accountability. The effect was not merely an institutional crisis, but a heightened social antagonism. Nixon's policy of political retaliation and his evasion of accountability were visible to the public and influenced the way ordinary Americans related to one another and the level of respect with which they did so. The administration's pattern of retaliation and concealment proceeded for a time without apparent consequences until the Watergate scandal finally ended the administration. While the echoes of these previous eras are present in the nation today, there are also important distinctions between those periods and this one. Digital platforms have dramatically altered the scale and speed at which public attacks, accusations, grievance framing, and misinformation spread by those in power become visible to mass audiences. Such audiences amplify these trends by aligning themselves with a side, reposting material, and perpetuating accusatory or misleading content. These punitive practices and climate of deflection unfold in real time, encouraged by algorithms, because, as contemporary analysts have discovered, outrage encourages platform engagement and drives views. History does not provide exact parallels or direct predictions. It does, however, illuminate recurring mechanisms. In periods when persecution, accusation, and evasion of accountability were modeled publicly by those in power, those practices did not remain confined to political and institutional leadership. They influenced broader patterns of conduct. The forms of change, the technologies change, but the visibility of how power behaves or misbehaves remains constant. Children, like adults, are attentive to the behavior of powerful figures. They see how dissenters are treated. They see how accusations are deployed. They see how responsibility is accepted or avoided. In environments where certain behaviors appear to carry little visible consequence, those behaviors may seem less costly to imitate. The question then is not whether the present mirrors Jim Crow, McCarthyism, or the Nixon era in identical form. It is how visible conduct by those in positions of authority continues to shape the social environments in which adults and children alike are learning how power is wielded, how it should function, and what it teaches them about how to behave.